Let thy blessing descend upon us here in assembly gathered, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote the honor and glory and to the advance the good of those whose interests thou hast committed us in our charge. All which we seek in thy name and the sake of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Please be seated.
Motion for the approval of the order paper as circulated.
Mr. President, I rise to move a motion for the approval of the order paper as circulated.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that the approval for the order paper circulated be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Messages from the Deputy Governor General. Announcements by the President.
This morning, I do have two announcements which I need to address. The first one pertaining the Youth Parliament here in Nevis. The Commonwealth Youth Parliament Association will hold its inaugural meeting in Trinidad and Tobago, period 12th to 19th of July 2019. At the said conference, the 15th Youth Parliamentary Conference or debate will take place on Wednesday, the 17th of July 2019. It is anticipated that youths from Antigua, Barbuda, Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Montserrat, Nevis, St. Lucia, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, the Turks and Caicos Islands, as well as the host country, Trinidad and Tobago. On a different but related note, in March this year, we held our Youth Parliament on Commonwealth Day, in which 31 youth parliamentarians participated. Using a panel of 4 judges, 12 were selected to vie for the second round. In Trinidad and Tobago, and we have been lucky and fortunate to have received the motion for the Youth Parliament. And the motion, that's a motion, the 12 youth parliamentarians that were selected would vie for a place for the 4 to go to Trinidad. We have children from the 3 high schools, that is Junior High School, NISS, Nevis International Secondary School, as well as Charlestown Secondary School. It is anticipated that the selection would be made sometime in the week of the 7th of June, because the information should be sent back to Trinidad by the 12th of June. as to who would be attending, that is. And so I would take the opportunity now to ask as many of you who could find it possible to attend that sitting here at the House. Once the date has been finalized, the information will be submitted via the media houses. That's so far for one. The other issue that I want to bring to this Honorable House stems from something that took place earlier, and it embodies one of a former parliamentarian, Senator then Herman W. Liebert. The late Honorable Herman Bobby Liebert served as a senator in the Nevis Island Assembly for the period 1992 to 2000. For all those persons who follow the sitting of Assembly would have said that he served the political party which he embellished very well. Nevisians the world over would listen intently to his utterings, which to most of them was very dynamic. He was, in my view, an astute politician. Senator Liebert, as I recall, was very passionate in his views on Nevis's autonomy. And this was most evident in his presentation during the secession debate in 1998. I happened to have been the clerk then. I vividly recall during the budget session of 1999, where he pointed that the figures were off. The figures for the budget were off. And he painstakingly drew the attention of the House to it. This, to me, identified the precise nature of the late senator. His passing, in my view, is a loss to the overall development of Nevis. And so, in light of this, therefore, I seek that this House, as a mark of respect, stand for 1 minute of silence in his honor. Please stand. Kindly be seated. Madam Clerk, you could proceed.
Papers to be laid. Statements by ministers.
Mr. President, I rise to make a brief statement with regards to some of the activities that have been taking place within and around my ministry. Of course, we all know that I have an extremely busy ministry, one that is also very impactful. And I just want to report very briefly on a couple of the activities that have been taking place in and around the ministry over the past couple of weeks. With regards to sports, Mr. President, let me just take this opportunity to congratulate the Titans Track Club and A1 Technology for once again hosting another very successful meet at the Mondo Track facility at Low Ground that was held in early April. And of course, you would have seen the excellent display of athletic talent there on our facility. We, of course, from the Department of Sports, we and the Ministry of Education, we cannot host all of the activities that we want to have there. And so we always welcome private organizations, including the Titans and others, to host activities there. Of course, the ministry and the Nevis Island administration would have expended huge amounts of money in the facility, and we would like to see more use being made of that facility. I also want to report, Mr. President, that the Department of Sports, we continue to try our utmost in terms of getting our football coaches or our budding football coaches up to speed and certified. And we would have benefited very recently from a coaching course that was sponsored and organized by FIFA and the National Olympic Committee of St. Kitts and Nevis. We want to take this opportunity to thank FIFA for having us on their list and for ensuring that our coaches and our prospective and budding coaches of football in Nevis continue to receive some training. Mr. President, I also want to report that we continue to have quite a bit of basketball being played on the island, and just recently we would have had the conclusion of the Brownhill Communications sponsored basketball tournament at the Brownhill Hard Court. That would have gone for a couple of weeks. It would have gone well. I want to say kudos to, in particular, Mr. Kelvin Bramble from the Department of Sports for spearheading that tournament. And I also want to congratulate the eventual winners of the tournament, the Eagles. Mr. President, I also want to say that my ministry was very instrumental in getting some of our athletes to the Cayman Islands for the Carifta Games, the 2019 Carifta Games. And I'm also very proud to say, Mr. President, that 4 of our athletes would have done us exceptionally proud once they would have journeyed to the Cayman Islands. We would have received a bronze medal in a 4x4 relay competition. And of course, once the athletes would have been back here, my ministry would have organized a little event at the NEPAC courtyard to pay homage and honor our young athletes. Normally, of course, once they go overseas, once they travel and they do well, we like to honor them, and of course, we would have done that. And I want once again to publicly congratulate not only the 4 athletes who would have gotten a bronze medal at the Carifta Games, but for all of the athletes who would have traveled to the Cayman Islands. And as I said, of course, my ministry would have been extremely instrumental in ensuring that the athletes get to the Cayman Islands. And since I'm talking about the athletes and overseas travel as well, I also want to report that my ministry will be sponsoring some athletes and officials to go to the Whitsuntide Games in Grenada. That will be happening very shortly in the next couple of weeks. And we would have made the decision, a cabinet decision, to try to get our athletes more exposed in the region. And so that is why we would have made that decision to sponsor our athletes to go to Grenada for the Whitsuntide Games. Mr. President, I also want to briefly say that I'm very pleased with the work that is being done by some young men committee up in the Rollins Village area. And for the past few years, they would have organized what is called the Village Premier League, that is cricket. And that is ensuring more cricket is being played in Gingerland at the Hard Times playing field. Of course, my ministry would have done quite a bit of work, expended quite a bit of money on improving the facility at Hard Times. And we are always very happy, Mr. President, once we spend money on these facilities, that they are being properly utilized. And we would have had the Village Premier League there for the past couple of weeks. It would have ended on the 12th of May. And I want to congratulate the winners of the tournament, the Kings 11 from Rollins. And I also want to congratulate the second and third place winners, which would have been the GT United and the SDA Jets. And of course, the competition would have gone so well that the organizers are now trying to organize a female cricket tournament as well. Of course, we know that in the past we would have seen a lot of female cricket. Unfortunately, we are not seeing much of that now. And so the organizers have seen it fit to try to revive female cricket and trying to do that at the Hard Times playing field. And so they are hoping that over the next couple of weeks we will have a tournament involving females. And while I say that, they are actually having a meeting this evening for the females who would be interested. And so if you're a female and you want to play some cricket, and you want to play cricket at the Hard Times playing field, you can touch base with the guys there. Compliments and kudos to Mr. Michael Wise Herbert, the community liaison officer for that area, and his team for doing a marvelous job. I also want to say, Mr. President, that regarding sports, we had the under-17 Bath United football team that would have recently traveled to St. Martin to take part in a tournament there during the weekend of the 11th and the 12th. And out of 6 teams, they would have placed 3rd. I think it was a commendable effort by the Bath United under-17 team. And I really want to commend the organizers, the coach, the management, and of course, once again, Mr. President, I am proud that my Ministry of Sports would have assisted in their travel to St. Martin. I was particularly pleased when they were returning on Monday last. I traveled to the airport with some officials from the Department of Sports to meet the team and to congratulate them. And I was happy because we know that we've had some issues at the airport, our Vance W. Amory International Airport. And because of the fact that my ministry would have assisted in getting the team to St. Martin, we had the very efficient OMEL who would have done the charters, and we had 3 transangular flights coming in, one behind the other. The airport was busy, and I was very happy. I was very happy, Mr. President, when I sat there and I saw 3 planes coming in, one behind the other, to bring back our officials and the Bath United under-17 team. So once again, kudos to them for going to St. Martin and doing us proud. They came 3rd last year. They came 3rd this year. And I've challenged them to take it up a notch or 2 for next year. Mr. President, I also want to say that the Department of Sports would have recently organized the high school basketball tournament, and I want to say congratulations to the CSS team. And finally, for sports, in the area of sports, this past weekend we have seen the commencement of the long-awaited Nevis Cricket Association 40-over tournament. And that is being sponsored by Nagico. I want to say thanks to Nagico for coming on board and sponsoring. I know I would have given the Cricket Association some licks here and elsewhere, so I want to commend them now for getting cricket off the ground once again at the ETW Park. And so I'm very happy. I was there on Saturday for the start of the tournament. It's going to run for a couple of weeks. I've been told by the president that after that we're going to be having T20, and then after T20 we're going to go back to 40-over cricket. So we should be having a lot of cricket being played at the ETW Park. I just want to encourage people to come out and support our youthful talent that we have on display at the park. Moving along quickly, Ms. Yes. I have been reminded as well that apart from the team that is going to Grenada for the athletics, we're also sponsoring a couple of athletes to Barbados as well. We have been doing so much, Mr. President, that sometimes I tend to forget. There's so much to report. Because whenever I come here, Mr. President, I always say that I have an extremely busy ministry. Mr. President, I also want to report quickly that in the area of community development, we continue to work with our at-risk youth, and we would have recently had a workshop for at-risk youth in terms of character building. We would have had someone in from Jamaica, prodigal son, and to my estimation and from all reports, the sessions went extremely well. We had him going to all of the community centers, meeting with some of our at-risk youth. And I also want to take this opportunity, Mr. President, to invite members of the public out. On the 1st of June, Saturday the 1st of June, we'll be having what we call Gospel Explosion. We had an activity last year, Mr. President, and it went exceptionally well. And we are cognizant of the fact that we have a lot of activities, a lot of secular activities. And we also need to have activities for the Christian community as well. Because we must be minded that our members of the Christian community, they want to come out and have fun as well. And so the activity went so well last year, we have decided to make it an annual one. And so we're going to be having what is called Gospel Explosion. We're going to be having a competition involving 8 local singers and some dance groups from the churches. And the highlight of that Gospel Explosion will be DJ Nicholas out of Jamaica and Positive out of Trinidad. And so we are inviting the whole of Nevis to come out and mix and mingle, have fun with the Christian community on the 1st of June. Mr. President, I want to finally report very quickly on some happenings and activities with regards to culture. And I want to say that I'm very pleased to report that we've had some work taking place at the cultural complex. I would have made a promise last year that we're going to have some improvements being done to the media booths at the cultural complex. I am pleased to report that we would have had some work started and that work is now completed. And so all of our media officials will be in a much more comfortable and pleasing environment for Culturama 45. I also want to report as well that that has been completed. We are now working on a new ticket booth. The ticket booth that we had there was quite small, quite clumsy, and we have decided to construct a new one for this year. So work would have started on that, and we're also doing some work on the platform for the VIP area as well. I also want to report, as I speak about the cultural complex, that this year we are going to ensure that we have the stage area, the performance area covered. We normally have issues of a lot of stoppage with the shows and the performances during the shows at the cultural complex. And so we have decided that for 2019, for our milestone year, for Culturama 45, we will have that performance area, the stage area, covered. And I'm happy to report that the tenting for that area is actually en route to Nevis, and will definitely be here on time for Culturama 45. So we're going to have an enhanced look on the stage as well, with nice lighting and so on as well. If we could shift focus down to the cultural village, we're also going to be giving the food containers a facelift for this year. The painting should have actually started. However, we've had some delays because of the fact that last year we would have used oil paint. I think the year before we would have used oil paint. And we have realized that the oil paint fades out very quickly. And so we have been advised by the painters, as well as the persons who sell the paint, that you should use paint specifically designed for metal surfaces. And so we would have been waiting for that. The paint should have come in this week. And so we are hopeful that we can get that started as soon as possible. So both the cultural complex and the cultural village will have a facelift for Culturama 45. Mr. President, I also want to advise that Culturama 45, I think probably is now almost into high gear. We would have had the media launch on Friday the 3rd of May at the Mount Nevis Hotel. And of course, during the media launch, we would have had all the media houses there. We would have unveiled the calendar, the extensive calendar of activities for Culturama 45. During the media launch, Mr. President, we would have also revealed our patron for the festival. And the patron for the festival, for those who may not know as yet, the patron is Miss Felicia Hicks, also known as Gladys France. She's from the St. James area, and I want to congratulate her heartily. She's someone who has been at the forefront of folklore on Nevis for quite some years. I think she normally does work with the Red Cross. I think she's the matron for the Red Cross. And I want to publicly congratulate Ms. Hicks for being chosen as our patron for Culturama 45. As I said, we have an extensive list of activities for the pre as well as for the Culturama. I also want to report, Mr. President, that coming on the heels of that, just this past Saturday, we went back to the Mount Nevis Hotel to do something a little different that we normally do. We had the reveal of our senior pageant contestants, and I am proud to say that we are breaking records this year. We have 6 contestants for all of the senior pageants. 6 for Mr. Cool, 6 for Miss Culture Swimwear, 6 for Miss Culture. It's been years since we've had that. And I really want to thank those contestants who would have come forward. And I want to thank the management team, Miss Burton and her team, for the senior management pageants subcommittee for pulling it off. It went very well. And I want once again to congratulate those who would have come forward and all who would have worked so far in getting that reveal. I know that a lot of people may not have been at the Mount Nevis, but I want to assure the public that very shortly, on the 14th of June, all of Nevis will get an opportunity to see our contestants for the senior pageants as well as the other shows. And we will be having our launch of the festival in the heart of Charlestown on Friday the 14th of June. So that is a date that everyone needs to circle on their calendar, because we want to see everyone in Charlestown for the launch of the festival. And of course, we'll have the official opening of the festival on Thursday, the 25th of July. Culturama 45 goes from July the 25th until August the 6th. And of course, our slogan is Love, Passion, Pride, Culturama 45. And Mr. President, as I'm about to round up, I want once again, as I use this opportunity, to encourage all of us, nationals, residents, those of you in the diaspora. We want you to be a part of this festival. This is being billed as another homecoming. And so we want all of our family and friends in the diaspora to start making our preparations to be here, and not just to be a spectator. We want you to participate. And of course, we want Culturama, or we can assure that Culturama 45 will be the best ever hosted on Nevis. Mr. President, I want to thank you for your indulgence. May it please you.
Mr. President, I rise as per the order paper statements by ministers. And just to update, Mr. President, this House and the people of Nevis of my recent participation in the OECS Ministers of Environment meeting in Martinique on the 15th to the 17th of May, COMES 6, where, Mr. President, a number of issues were discussed as it pertains to our environment. And I just want to highlight 3 areas, Mr. President. Funding for making our infrastructure more resilient. And we recognize, Mr. President, that there is quite a bit of funding that is available for ensuring that states in the Caribbean, and in particular vulnerable states, make their infrastructure a bit more resilient. It was, however, recognized that there is a weakness, Mr. President, in OECS territories accessing these funds. And it was agreed and discussed that there be a much more collaborated approach for small island states to be able to access these funds, where we can share the experiences from other territories as to how they were able to access these funds. And, Mr. President, that is of critical importance for us here in Nevis, because we very well know that in the event of natural disaster, and more in particular hurricanes, a lot of our infrastructure can be severely affected. And that is an area, Mr. President, that we will be looking at very seriously as it regards to accessing these funds. We also look, Mr. President, at GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And I speak about this because the issue of marijuana came up, and the matter of genetically modified marijuana in the Caribbean. I am not a marijuana smoker, Mr. President, but it was generally felt that if we were to see GMOs as it relates to marijuana in the Caribbean, we would lose. And I choose my word very carefully, Mr. President. We will use that uniqueness of the Caribbean marijuana. And so, while there are protocols that were established and are already in place, it is generally felt that the Caribbean must make sure that they do everything that is possible to protect this from happening as it regards to having cross-pollination of that particular plant. Mr. President, we also looked at renewable energy as it relates to ensuring that the economies of the OECS continue to thrive. We look at wind, solar, and of course, geothermal. And Mr. President, I make the case that here in Nevis we have been pursuing geothermal for around 20 years now. Not so long? 19 years. No, man. 4 then. Oh. Mr. President, at least 15 years. Let's work with that period. And we recognize also, Mr. President, our neighbor, Montserrat, have been wrestling with this issue as well. The Windward Islands have been wrestling with it. And we generally felt that we need to be able to build that cooperation in the OECS, where each territory can learn from each other as to how they can pursue this very vital resource. Mr. President, I just wanted to make mention of those 3 areas and to say that next year, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis will in fact be hosting this event. And I am certainly looking forward to ensuring that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis can put on a good show as Martinique did, or even better. Mr. President, I want to switch to another area of infrastructure as it relates to road infrastructure. At the budget debate, Mr. President, I indicated that we were looking very seriously at having the road from Cotton Ground to the airport rehabilitated. We have looked at it, Mr. President, and we invited 3 contractors to provide some quotation. The numbers, Mr. President, that were submitted were a bit out of what we were thinking about spending at the time. And so, Mr. President, we would have split the project into 2 phases. That is from Cotton Ground to the Cliff Dwellers area. And we have had a quotation from Dipcon Construction of the Windward Islands, Kelly Construction, based in St. Kitts, and Surrey Paving, who we all know have been around St. Kitts and Nevis for some time. We have looked at all of the numbers, Mr. President, and with the advice and the consultation and the recommendation, we have decided to move with Surrey Paving. Mr. President, we are hoping that this project can get on stream very shortly once everything are in place. And I just want to alert the motorists that when this project is on stream, there is expected to be some interruption and disruption in that area as it relates to that road construction. Mr. President, I want to speak very briefly on water. And I know that we are all recognizing that we are facing some challenges with water. Mr. President, this drought is a very serious drought. From all reports that I've had and I've seen, that is one of the worst that we have had in a very long time. But we continue, Mr. President, to impress upon BEAD, who still have a contract with the NIA to explore for additional water. They have given us some advice that they are pursuing certain avenues in which they can start this project, and we are hoping, Mr. President, that they can get this project on stream very quickly. It's a project of finding new water and just turning over the wells to us immediately. Mr. President, I also want to indicate that we continue to pursue the filtration system at a well that was laying around in the Hamilton area for some time. And we are just about, Mr. President, to have that process up and running, as we would have selected our supplier for that filtration system. We have also, I think it was just yesterday, signed a contract for a 400,000+ gallon water tank to be constructed in the Hamilton area. And Mr. President, I am of the view that once this filtration system is online, and once this water storage tank in the Hamilton area is constructed, we will see significant relief in the water situation. And we are hoping, Mr. President, that this can be completed during the latter part of this year. Mr. President, I just want to also indicate that we continue to make progress on the Brown Hill Road rehabilitation, the Bath Village Road rehabilitation, and we have completed the installation of the water mains in the Craddock Road area. Mr. President, I would stop there at this time and to indicate that we continue to do our part to make sure that the people of Nevis can see better days ahead. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, before I'm accused of being too long this morning and making a budget presentation here in this honorable house, I'm going to be extremely brief. I'm going to be extremely brief this morning and talk about just two things. First of all, Mr. President, we're in the middle of celebrating Agriculture Awareness Month. And of course, I'm not going to look back, but I'm going to look forward and talk about a few things that are going to happen between now and the end of the month. Things have been going well so far, and of course, I will remind the general public that we started this Agriculture Awareness Month some 7 or 6 years ago. This is our 7th hosting of this particular month of activities. And over the years, we have had new additions. We have had duplications. We have had training sessions. We have had quite a number of things that takes place during the month of May. As a matter of fact, it has been so successful that other departments and ministries have joined us or collaborated with us or have partnered with us to ensure that they also brought into the spotlight, which is a good thing because we are one administration. And indeed, together, we are much better together, if I can use that slogan. So the more they are, the merrier it is. And we have had some good collaboration with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Tourism, and also, of course, all of the ministries and departments that social development as well has joined us in recent times. So that is a good thing. Mr. President, on Thursday of this week, that's in a couple of days, we are continuing with our Thursdays and recognizing Thursday as Eat Local Day. We have had 3 activities so far at 3 different restaurants here on the island of Nevis, and we want to thank the restaurants that would have participated and partnered with us over the last 3 weeks. And this week, Thursday, though, it is the time for us to gather down at Sunshine's Sunshine's Bar and Restaurant. Now, Sunshine has always had almost 90% of local ingredients on his plate. So this is not anything new to this particular establishment. But when we called him, he immediately said, come down, and he would prepare local dishes for the patrons who are going to come there. Now, he normally boasts of having local salads, local hot pepper, pepper sauce, or however you want to put it. And of course, his salads are the best. So I want the entire Nevision public to come down and patronize Sunshine on this particular day. I will be there, all being well, and we're hoping that maybe he might give us some reduction in the prices, but it should be around $25 per plate, I would think. So that would be a day to make your date with your significant other, or you can bring your office workers or co-workers down to Sunshine, and let's have lunch together down at Sunshine on Thursday. On Friday, Mr. President, is a brand new activity we are introducing this year. It is dubbed Farmers Market. Now, I said some time ago that I would have gone to the Republic of China, Taiwan, and I've gone to a night market where they sell almost everything. Clothes, food, shoes, vegetables, everything. I believe the member for Nevis too, and Premier would recall us going to a night market in Taiwan some years ago. Wonderful event. And we're not duplicating that, but the idea itself is somewhat similar, where we are having a farmer's market that is going to start at 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon. So if it starts at 4 p.m., it means we're going into the evening, into the night. What we are hoping to accomplish there are a couple of things. One, we want to cater to office workers who are around town and want to purchase their vegetables and products and produce before they go home, so that on Saturday morning they can sleep in a bit later and not have to get up to go to the market to buy their provisions. As a matter of fact, we're also going to cater to householders who are going to come into town and at that time of the day, because town is a melting pot, so to speak. It's not going to be in the heart of Charlestown, though, but on Government Road, that piece of land just opposite Club Trenham. That's where the communities of Government Road and Hamilton would have their Christmas or their annual Christmas tree lighting each year. So we're adopting that space for Friday afternoon starting at 4 p.m. There'll be music, there'll be drinks, there'll be eats, there'll be everything there. And we're going to give away some items as well, like wax apple and also star apple as well. So those will be given away. Those products we normally would have produced right over there, grow right over there at that location in Catesby that was formerly under the control of the Republic of China Taiwan Technical Mission. So we will have that event on Friday afternoon. So I'm inviting the whole of Nevis. Now when you get there, you can make your exit towards the south or towards the north on the I said the bypass road, but let me call it by its correct name, the Stuart Williams Drive. Either way, to make your exit out of Charlestown or out of that particular location. So there shouldn't be any difficulty. So I'm inviting one and all to come and enjoy that event. There's another event that I want to highlight as well, Mr. President. Next Friday, I believe next Friday is the 31st of May. 31st of May, right? My calculation is right. We are having somewhat of a new event as well. It is an extension of what we've had in the past. We've had, to culminate the month, what we call Pork Festival. This time around, we are calling it Meat Fest. It means then we are using all of the different types of meat, or those will be available to the general public next Friday. It will be held right there on the Charlestown waterfront, just on the opposite side of, in front of Pass Bar area. That space will be utilized. Now, if I may just say that at our abattoir, we have about 20 different style of meat that we process there. I was amazed at the number when I was told recently. They continue to do a phenomenal job there at the abattoir. That is Gary Griffin and his team. And those meat and meat products will be available. You'll have cooked meat, you'll have, as we say, raw meat or unprocessed meat available to the general public. Now, if you're a meat lover, I want you to come. If you appreciate meat, come along. Some people don't eat meat. That's fine, and we understand. Some have an appreciation where they consume just a little bit, and some consume meat in a larger quantity, but we'll be catering to one and all. That event starts somewhere around, I believe it's about 8 a.m. on Friday of next week, and it goes down throughout the day. So until all of the meat is sold or until persons would have had their required quantities. So that is a new event, and we continue to do these things, Mr. President, because some may claim nothing is happening in agriculture, and so I suppose we don't talk a lot about agriculture sometimes, but we believe in action, in doing things, and I believe we have done a tremendous job since 2013 to keep agriculture on the lips and in the mouth of the people of Nevis, and also have brought new persons along into the sector as well too, because day after day, persons are asking for a little piece of land to do something. And I want to highlight something also at this point in time, Mr. President, that we are proud of, and it's an initiative that was spoken about by the member for Nevis 2 and Premier, and that is planting of trees, tree planting exercise, or tree planting project. We started planting 500 fruit trees, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago, we initiated that project. 2 weeks ago, it was the 7th of May, I believe it was. Tuesday, the 7th of May. And we have seen an influx into the Department of Agriculture at Prospect, where householders are coming and asking and requesting and have been getting various fruit trees to take back to their premises. And I want to thank those who have come. What we are going to do, though, we're not just giving out these trees and say, here is a fruit tree, go and plant. We're going to follow up as time goes by to make sure that they're doing the right things to nurture that fruit tree, and also perhaps planting additional trees in their backyard. It is a simple process, Mr. President. When you look at the importance of trees to this island, we breathe out carbon dioxide. That is what is absorbed by trees. They emit oxygen. We inhale that. So it's a cycle. So when you remove a tree, then you're removing that portion of a cycle that is important to all of us as human beings, or all of us as citizens here on the island of Nevis. So it's simple. Plant a tree and you're sustaining your survival here on the island of Nevis, and perhaps throughout the world as well too. But I'm talking in the local context, and I want persons to understand the importance of planting trees. If you destroy one, replant. And that is what we are trying to preach to our affordable income homeowners, that it's important to plant trees, because we would have had to remove trees in some instances to construct these houses. Mr. President, so that is Agriculture Awareness Month for you in a nutshell, and we continue to get information out and through the local media, so you'll hear more about what is to come from other persons who are involved in the department day-to-day running. Mr. President, on Monday, the 20th of May, we saw a significant point in time in our development here on the island of Nevis. That day saw the initiation of operations at the new water taxi facility. Let me say, Mr. President, we're not near to completion as yet in terms of the onshore or unland infrastructure, but we're continuing with our work over there. The important thing, though, is that we have initiated the usage of the water taxi pier. And I will say I've stood there over the last day and a half, for example, not all throughout the day, but at various times, and I've listened to the comments. And so far, I've been hearing absolutely favorable comments about the facility itself. Like I said, it's not completed as yet, but when it's done, I believe we'll have a world-class facility over there, one that is inviting to all of the visitors and citizens, residents who would use that facility. Indeed, we have had our difficulties over the years, over the last year and a half, 2 years. Challenges were there. But what I can say is that because of the vision and the wisdom of this administration, we have seen a project that has gotten to the point where it's at, because that vision and that wisdom that we sat down around a table and came up with this particular idea about 2 years ago, that is now bearing some fruits. And I want to say to everyone involved, NASPA is going to be managing that location, and of course the citizens and residents who would use it, is to respect the facility, in that we know it's not completed and the comments are there, but that's fine. Persons are free to voice their opinion, but keep in mind that if you were to look just across the ocean from that, or just up the beach from that, you see where we're coming from to where we are and where we're headed. And I believe the member for Nevis too and Premier would have, thanked the Yarwoods for their patience, so to speak, in allowing the Nevisian public to utilize their property over the years. And I want to publicly thank them as well too for their patience and their understanding. But of course, they themselves had gotten to the point where they wanted to see a movement out of their area so that they can satisfy the needs and wants of their guests in a way that is consistent with the service that they're offering. So I want to thank them publicly, and I want to say to the Nevisian public that we are moving ahead in the right direction, and I believe that over the next 50 to 100 years, we'll all be gone, I'm sure. Well, not I'm sure, I know I'll be gone, because I can't define what is reality. But I know over the next 50 to 100 years, the wisdom behind it will still be there. The vision that was initiated 2 years ago will still be bearing fruits then. And I want us all to be proud of that particular facility. And I want to say those who are still working, they continue to put out that effort to ensure that we get to where we want to go. Mr. President, I'll speak more about that, but like I said, this is not a budget presentation. So I thank you for the few minutes. May it please you, sir.
Mr. President, good morning to you and to the other members of this Honorable House, and of course to the members in the gallery. I rise to make a very brief statement on the imminent temporary closure of the Four Seasons Resort as they undertake the last phase of their multi-million-dollar upgrade to restore that resort to the most luxurious in all of the Caribbean. The nation will recall that as far back as the budget debates of December 2018, I made a statement announcing that the closure will occur on June 1st and continue for the months of June, July, August, and September. It was my Cabinet's position at the time that we should give as much notice as possible to the workers at Four Seasons and the general public so that all affected could plan effectively for the closure. My government has been very proactive in trying to manage the negative impacts of this closure. The closure is intended to be temporary and last for 4 months. I'm advised that the closure will impact the jobs of just over 400 employees at the Four Seasons. Other employees not impacted will continue to work as usual. The Four Seasons, in discussions with the government, has decided to pay to each affected worker 25% of his or her normal wages during the period of closure when that worker would not be working. That 25% would be payable to affected workers regardless of whether they obtain a temporary job elsewhere during the closure. In addition, workers will continue to have their full medical, insurance, and other benefits during this 4-month period. The payment of 25% is gratuitous and is comparable to what workers would generally earn during the summer low season for tourism, when many workers would get only 2 days per week. We thank Four Seasons for its demonstrated commitment to its workers. The resort has made it clear to the government its desire to hold on to its workers and ensure their job security when the resort opens in October 2019. The government is engaged throughout this period with the Four Seasons Resort at the highest levels, including a meeting between the resort management and the Cabinet. The government has also engaged with Social Security and the various banks and financial houses operating on Nevis and the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Nevis Division. We have written to Social Security supporting a request by Four Seasons that no Social Security deductions be taken from the 25% payment to affected workers over this 4-month temporary closure. We have also written to Social Security advising that the government will forego any social services levy, and that no deductions be made from the 25% payment to workers. This will ensure, Mr. President, that workers take home as much of the 25% payment as possible. We have also written to all the local banks and financial houses seeking their cooperation and indulgence to forego payments by affected workers on any loans or other financial commitments owed by such workers during the 4-month closure. In meetings with the executive of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, I have urged our private sector to assist as much as they can with temporary jobs for affected workers during the period of closure. In addition, Mr. President, the government has been advised that the Homeowners Association at the Four Seasons Resort has agreed to make a pool of funds available to top up payments to the affected workers. I cannot today disclose more, as the total funds and the methodology for distribution among the affected workers are still being finalized. This gesture by the homeowners, however, will ensure that affected workers get additional financial relief during the period of the closure. We are all aware that in preparation for the massive renovations to begin on June 1st, the principal contractor, DCK Worldwide, held job fairs at Four Seasons during May 7th and 8th, 2019, to interview and hire workers for the construction process. My government had made it clear to the Four Seasons and to DCK that workers affected by the temporary closure who were qualified should be given first preference for employment in the construction process. As a result, DCK held a job fair exclusively for affected Four Seasons workers on May 6th, before the more general job fair for the general public. We are advised that about 100 of the 400 plus affected workers applied to DCK, and we await word as to how many would have been successful. The Four Seasons has also advised that positions at other Four Seasons resorts globally, where available, will be another opportunity for some workers who qualify to take up during this 4-month period of temporary closure. Mr. President, my government has tried its best to prepare workers for this difficult period and stands ready and willing to do more as the government's finances permit. As a government, our core guiding principle has always been that people matter most, and that the best interests of our people must be at the center of all of our actions. It is for this reason that we have been so proactive on this issue and have made regular public statements and engaged in ongoing efforts to assist and ameliorate the impact of this closure on workers and their families. Nevis, as we know, Mr. President, is a robust democracy, alive with political debate and public discussions. We have heard that some workers are being told that they should have obtained a better deal and should be entitled to severance payments from the government. We understand that some will seek to make political mischief and use this unavoidable closure and the difficulties to our people caused thereby for their own narrow political self-interest. I say today that there is no room for this. The workers at Four Seasons deserve the fullest support by all during this difficult time. I would, however, like to point out for the record, Mr. President, that the 25% being paid by Four Seasons and any additional payments by homeowners is entirely gratuitous. There was no legal obligation on their part to pay anything. I would also like to point out that payments received by workers during other times when the resort
Could you use your mic, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Mr. Speaker, President.
Yes.
On a point of order.
Yes.
We are speaking on the minister's statements. And it is my understanding that we seek on the minister's statements not to be political or controversial. And I did hear the representative for number 2, constituency number 2, speak of mischief or words by people who try to take political advantage. While I do not wish to deprive the Speaker of his opinion, it should be done under debate rather than this form, Mr. President. And if you can so advise him.
Mr. President, I saw my statement as a statement of fact. I don't think we live in a vacuum. We all live here. We understand what is being said. As the Minister with responsibility for finance and for the economy.
Fact or not, Mr. President, I don't know that the Speaker has brought any proof here. And even if it is a matter of fact, I still believe it is a matter for debate rather for a matter like this.
All right. Let me interject here, please. What the member for constituency number 2 was doing actually was to inform the public Nevisians as to what is taking place. If in your view, by him saying that what is on the road, some people are using it for political gains or political mischief, I don't see the need for an objection on that because it is in the public domain. And so I would listen attentively to see how far and where he goes with that. And so on that matter, I would ask him to continue, please. Thank you.
Mr. President, for the record, I propose to go no further. I've made my statement. I would, however, like to point out that 25% being paid by Four Seasons and any additional payments by homeowners is entirely gratuitous. There was no legal obligation on their part to pay anything. I would also like to point out that payments received by workers during other times when the resort was closed as a result of hurricane damage are not comparable to now, as this closure is voluntary for renovations, while those closures were caused by hurricane damage, and therefore business interruption insurance applied then, which does not apply in this case. On the issue of severance payment, the advice which the government has received is that severance payment is applicable only where the employment has ended. Here it is contemplated that the employment will continue even though the resort is temporarily closed. And I pointed out earlier, Mr. President, that workers during the closure will get the 25% of their ordinary salaries, plus they will continue to get all the benefits, medical and otherwise, to which they are entitled. I would, however, urge workers who wish to better understand their legal rights and benefits to consult with Mr. Gary Liebert and his team at the Department of Labor. My government is committed to supporting our workers and their families. Lastly, Mr. President, the Four Seasons has advised the government that the negative impact on workers will be significantly lessened as they will urge workers to take their annual vacations with full pay during this period of closure. And in addition, they intend to recall workers full-time in September 2019 to retrain and get ready for the grand reopening scheduled for October 2019. Put differently, the period of closure would be June to the end of September, but workers are expected to take their vacation and they expect to recall workers in September for retraining and preparation for the reopening. Mr. President, as the Premier of Nevis, I have always sought to be forthright and honest with the people who have reposed their trust and confidence in me and my team to serve them. There is no doubt that the next 4 months will be difficult for all of us, and especially so for the affected workers and their families. However, I am confident that the indomitable will and unbreakable spirit of our people, coupled with the grace of Almighty God, which has seen us through trials and tribulations in the past, will see us through this temporary closure as well. We look forward, all of us, to a grand reopening of the finest resort in the Caribbean in October 2019, and I thank the owners of the Four Seasons Resort for the massive injection of foreign direct investment into our beautiful island of Nevis. Thank you, Mr. President.
Public Business, Bills second and third readings.
Mr. President, I rise to move that the bill shortly entitled Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2019 be read a second time and pass. Second time.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion before this Honorable House.
Mr. President, I rise once again to make my contribution to the bill shortly entitled Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2019. And Mr. President, I want to commence my presentation by giving an indication from whence we have come. Mr. President, in 2016, the Nevis Island Administration obtained grant funding from CARPA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, for consultancy to review the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, with the goal to improve it and produce regulations for the ordinance. Ms. Tira Green, a consultant based in Anguilla, was awarded a contract by CARPA after a tendering process. And Mr. President, the terms of reference refer to the review and update of the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Ordinance of 2005. And the service provider, Mr. President, were to, 1, analyze the 2005 version of the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance. 2, analyze the 2009 version of the St. Kitts and Nevis Ordinance, Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, revised edition of 2009. Analyze the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Ordinance 2011, number 13 of 2011. Study the current version of the draft Nevis Physical Development Plan. Consult with the service providers reviewing and updating the physical development plan so as to take into consideration the adjustments to be made to the physical development plan. 6, conduct consultation with relevant groups, with government agencies and civil society. 7, prepare guidelines for cabinet review and signing of agreements for new development projects or programs. 8, draft amendments to the Nevis Physical Development Ordinance 2005. 9, draft appropriate regulations within the ordinance. 10, facilitate public review of the amended legislation. 11, host clarification meetings with key stakeholders. And 12, finalize redraft Nevis Physical Development Ordinance. Mr. President, the consultant produced the draft amendments to the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance. They also produced the Physical Planning, Electronic Filing and Document Regulations, the Physical Planning and Development Control Environmental Impact Assessment and Hazard Vulnerability Assessment Regulations. Also, Mr. President, the Physical Planning and Development Control Advertisement Regulations and the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Regulations were produced. Mr. President, last year, we took a decision to review the ordinance and regulations based on the work done thus far. The process was done by the Ministry of Physical Planning and Environment, the Department of Physical Planning, and the Legal Department. The drafting of the bill and regulations, Mr. President, was led by our Legal Department, who must be commended, and Mr. President, in particular, Ms. Althea Campbell, for her hard work and dedication to this particular process. Mr. President, the first reading of the bill was made in October last year, and the general public was given a chance to submit their comments and recommendations. Since that time, the Ministry, the Department of Physical Planning, and the Legal Department met with I say person, Mr. President, but only one individual, after receiving very good comments on the draft ordinance. Mr. President, I want to thank my former boss, Ms. Daphne Hobson, or Dr. Daphne Hobson, for her invaluable contribution to this process and her recommendation as it regards to the proposed amendments. Today, Mr. President, we are here to execute the first stage, which is to amend the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance. And Mr. President, I want to refer to the proposed amendments of the ordinance. In Section 2 of the principal ordinance, it is amended in the definition of owner by deleting the word no, where it first appears, and replacing it with the word not, Mr. President. Section B, person, by deleting the word incorporate and replacing it with the word incorporated, Mr. President. Section C, inserting in the appropriate alphabetical sequence the following new definitions. Beach, Mr. President. And the definition for beach in this ordinance would be: beach means that an area of the coastal zone from the seaward limit of the foreshore running inland to the vegetation line or other natural barrier represented by a marked change in material or natural physiographic form, whichever is closer to the landward limit of the foreshore, or when there is no such marked change in the material or natural physiographic form, the beach shall be deemed to extend to a distance of 20 meters landward from the mean high water mark, or such lesser distance as may be determined by the Minister in consultation with the Director of Physical Planning, and the beach may consist of sand, stones, gravel, shingle, coral fragment, or boulders. Mr. President, we are inserting that interpretation as it regards to what is the interpretation of a beach. Official website means, Mr. President, the NIA government website, nia.gov.kn. The proposed amendment, Mr. President, to Section 3. Section 3 of the principal ordinance is amended in Section A by subsection 1 by deleting the subparagraph E, and also to Section B by repealing subsection 2, Mr. President. Amendment to Section 4. Subsection 4, Mr. President. 3 of the principal ordinance is amended by A, inserting immediately after the word Gazette the words on the official website of the Nevis Island Administration. And Mr. President, this is important because we have moved into a technology age. And I am not certain, Mr. President, as to how many persons are paying much attention to our Gazette. And those Gazettes, Mr. President, are critical as it regards to the publication of any laws And we feel that it's important to have this information placed on the government official website, where persons, Mr. President, can be able to see and access them. Mr. President, we are proposing amendment to Section 6 of the Principal Ordinance and Section A in subsection 6.2 by inserting after paragraph E a new paragraph F as follows: an environmental health officer. Mr. President, we feel that it is critically important, Mr. President, that our Development and Advisory Committee must have at its disposal in its meeting an environmental health officer. Because we feel, Mr. President, at that early stage, issues regarding environmental health can be analyzed, picked up, and disposed of in a very early stage, Mr. President. Mr. President, amendment to Section 6.7 by deleting the word any 5 voting members and substituting the words a simple majority of the voting members. Amendment, Mr. President, to Section C by inserting after subsection 6.10 a new subsection 6.10a as follows: 6.10a, subsection 6.10 shall not apply to any member of the Development Advisory Committee who, by reason of his or her employment, is charged with any supervisory or managerial responsibility for a project, the subject of an application being considered by the committee. Mr. President, we are also proposing amendments to Section 12 of the parent legislation, and Section 12 of the Principal Ordinance is amended by, in subsection 2, by inserting after the word Nevis the words "and in one online news media." Mr. President, the idea is to try and make the information that is and that should be in the public domain more accessible. And we are thinking that we can do so by ensuring that it's published in one online news media. Mr. President, we are also proposing amendment to Section 14. Section 14 of the Principal Ordinance is amended in subsection 3 by inserting after the word Gazette a comma, followed by the word published on the official website of the Nevis Island Administration and in one news media in general circulation in the island of Nevis. Mr. President, once again, trying to get the information to the general public using different media platforms, Mr. President. Our proposal, Mr. President, to amend Section 15 of the Parent Ordinance and Section 15 of the Principal Ordinance, Mr. President, is amended in subsection 1 by deleting the words "the minister signifies in writing." Now, Mr. President, this is something that, for me, I've always been concerned, Mr. President. Why is it that any minister would want to have this direct intervention as it regards to the approval and the process of planning? My personal view is that, Mr. President, and that the minister should be setting policy and leave the day-to-day running and approval to the persons who are charged with that responsibility, Mr. President. And Mr. President, this is an amendment that we are reverting back to the parent legislation of 2005. Amendment, Mr. President, to Section 16. Section 16 of the Principal Ordinance is amended in Section A, in Section 1B, by deleting the word "on" following the words Nevis Island Administration and substituting the words "of." In Section B, in subsection 2E, by deleting the word of, following the word advertisement, and substituting the word on, Mr. President. Mr. President, further amendment is proposed to section 17. And Mr. President, we are considering reworking this particular section. And I believe that once we get to committee stage, Mr. President, we will do some additional work in that particular section, Mr. President. But there are some additional amendment proposed to amend to section 17. Mr. President, amendment to section 17(2) or 3. An application for permission to develop land shall not be made unless the director has considered and accepted the concept of the development to which the application relates. Mr. President, this whole section of section 17 speaks to the application to develop land. And as indicated, Mr. President, that initial section will be reworked slightly as it regards to the application to develop land. Mr. President, amendment to section 18. Section 18 of the Principal Ordinance, Mr. President, is amended by deleting the heading Approval in Principle and replacing it with the word Concept, Consideration, and Acceptance. Mr. President, we have found that that word approval have created quite a lot of, I'm going to use the word headache, Mr. President, for the planning department, because it appears as though that one person would have received the approval in principle. They are of the view that they can commence construction and go ahead with their project, but that is not the case, Mr. President. So we are changing the language, Mr. President, from approval in principle and replacing it with the word concept, consideration, and acceptance. In section B, Mr. President, in subsection 1, by deleting the word approval in principle and substituting the word consideration of concept. C, in subsection 3, by deleting the word approval in principle and substituting the words acceptance of concept wherever it occurs, Mr. President. And this followed throughout that particular amendment of subsection 18 of the parent legislation, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are also proposing amendment to section 20 of the Principal Ordinance. In subsection 1, by deleting the word approval in principle and substituting the word concept, consideration, and approval. In subsection 1, by inserting before the word the proposed development, the words in the opinion of the Director of Physical Planning. In subsection 4b, by deleting the word settling and substituting the word setting. There was a grammatical error there, Mr. President, and we are hoping to correct that grammatical error because it gives a total meaning whether it was settling versus setting. In subsection 5, Mr. President, by deleting the words into, appearing before the word consultation and substituting the word into. It was into, and we are replacing it with the word into. Mr. President, in subsection 5, by inserting after the word cost, the word of. In subsection 5, Mr. President, by inserting after the number 18, the number 08, Mr. President. Amendment, Mr. President, to subsection 22 of the parent ordinance is amended in subsection 3 by deleting the word may and substituting the word shall, Mr. President. And that for us, Mr. President, is a significant change because we feel that rather than having the word may being used, may means also it may not be done. And we want to ensure, Mr. President, that whatever is proposed in that part of the legislation will be done or shall be done. Mr. President, amendment to section 24 of the principal ordinance is amended in subsection 5 by deleting the word compiled and substituting the word complied. That, too, Mr. President, gives a different connotation as to what the legislation intended in its original form. It is presently compiled, and it really should have been, Mr. President, complied. And that changed, Mr. President, the entire connotation of what that particular piece of legislation intended. Mr. President, we initially proposed a few amendments to section 28, but at this time, Mr. President, we will not pursue those amendments at this time. We move, Mr. President, to amendment to section 29 of the principal ordinance. And section 29, Mr. President, of the principal ordinance is amended in subsection 1 by deleting the word with and substituting the word within, Mr. President. Amendment to section 31 of the principal ordinance is amended in subsection 1 by deleting the word month and substituting the word months. Mr. President, some of these are just grammatical correction, which we feel that once we would have bring about any amendments to the legislation that we felt it was necessary, Mr. President, to correct those grammatical errors so that we can make sure that the legislation have the right connotation as to what its initial drafters intended. Mr. President, in subsection 1, by inserting the following new subsection in the appropriate sequence. 2 new sections, Mr. President, is being proposed. 1A, where an applicant is granted concept acceptance in accordance with section 18, but fails to submit detailed plans within 24 months or within such time as stipulated by the director in the letter granting concept acceptance, the concept acceptance lapse. Mr. President, the idea is that we don't necessarily want to have our planning department go through a vigorous process. And 18 months have passed, 2 years have passed, 5 years have passed, Mr. President, and nothing happens. We are of the view that if that developer intends to pursue that development, that they should at least, Mr. President, revert back to the planning department in some way, shape, or form. And we have seen, Mr. President, that after this length of time would have passed, and developers would have had the idea, there are changes, Mr. President, to the concept. And we are saying that we want to make sure that before they can proceed, they can at least revert back to the planning department with a new application. 1B, where the concept acceptance lapse in accordance with subsection 1A, and the applicant wish to proceed with the development to which it relates, the applicant must make a fresh application for concept consideration and acceptance to the Director of Physical Planning in accordance with subsection 17. And Mr. President, that section is just basically to tidy up the section before, that if an application lapse, then the applicant must revert back to our planning department for concept and consideration, approval, and acceptance. Mr. President, amendment to Section C of Section 11, in subsection 2, by deleting the word compel and substituting the word completed. Once again, Mr. President, tidying up some grammatical errors in the parent document. In subsection 2, by deleting the word 30 and substituting the phrase 36, Mr. President. In subsection 2, again, by inserting the following new subsection, 2A. If permission lapses pursuant to subsection 2 and the developer wishes to complete the development, the developer must write to the Director of Physical Planning seeking permission to complete the development, and the Director of Physical Planning must indicate to the developer which documents, if any, must be submitted before permission can be granted. Mr. President, this once again ties into the two new sections which we have inserted above, that if a permission being lapsed, then the process of reapplying must be followed and must be continued, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are also proposing amendment to subsection 34. Section 34 of the Principal Ordinance is amended in subsection 1 by deleting the word may, where it first appears, and substituting the word shall. Mr. President, the word may, once again, may or may not, or you won't, and we are saying, Mr. President, it really should be shall, because what we are hoping is that the legislation can really have the kind of teeth, Mr. President, that we are hoping that it will have. In subsection 3, by deleting the word and after the word gazette and substituting the word in, Mr. President. In subsection 3, Mr. President, by inserting after the word Nevis the words and on the official website of the Nevis Island Administration. The idea, Mr. President, is to have the information disseminated via the NAA platform, because, as I said before, I'm not certain, Mr. President, if anyone is really paying any attention to the Gazette, Mr. President. So we are using this platform to make sure that we get the necessary information out to the general public. In subsection 5, by deleting the word of, following the word pursuant, and substituting the word to. Once again, Mr. President, tidying up the grammatical observation that we would have picked up throughout the legislation. In subsection 5, by deleting the word establish and substituting the word established, Mr. President. In subsection 8, by deleting the word the, which appears after the word Director of Physical Planning. And in subsection 8, by inserting the word the before the words Director of Physical Planning. Once again, Mr. President, tidying up a few grammatical, making sure that the initial intent of the legislation, Mr. President, carries through. In subsection 35, Mr. President, in subsection 1, by deleting the word may again, where it first appears, and substituting the word shall. In subsection 2, by deleting the word and after the word gazette and inserting a comma thereafter. In subsection 2, by inserting after the word Nevis the words and on the official website of the Nevis Island Administration. Once again, Mr. President, doing a little bit of tidying up. Amendments to subsection 36, Mr. President. In subsection 2, by deleting the word compiled and substituting the word complied. changing the whole connotation, Mr. President, of the intention of that particular section. In subsection 5, by deleting the word 1 and substituting the word 10, Mr. President. In subsection 5, by deleting the number 50 and replacing it with the number 100, Mr. President. In subsection 6, by deleting the word carry and substituting the word carrying, Mr. President. Amendment, Mr. President, to section 39. The ordinance is amended in section 39(2)(a) by deleting the word compiled and substituting the word complied, Mr. President. Amendment to section 40 of the principal ordinance by deleting subsection 1 and 2 and substituting the following. If, in the opinion of the Director of Physical Planning, it is expedient to prevent the carrying out of a development in relation to which planning permission has not been granted, he may serve a stop notice in respect of the land prohibiting any person on whom it is served, whether by themselves or through their agent or servants, from carrying on or continuing any specified operations on the land, Mr. President. 2, if a stop notice is to be served in respect to any land in relation to which an afford notice has already been served with regards to any specified operation on the land, A, alleged to be carried out without permission, B, in breach of conditions subject to which permission was granted, or C, so closely associated with those operations as to constitute substantially the same operation, then the stop notice must not be served before the expiry of the period allowed for compliance in the enforcement notice, and must contain a reference to and have annexed to it a copy of the enforcement notice previously served, Mr. President. And Mr. President, once again, we are tightening up a bit on the matter of stop notice and persons carrying out development without planning approval. We also, Mr. President, are proposing to insert a new subsection 40A as follows. And 40A gives, Mr. President, the right to appeal against stop notice. If any person on whom a stop notice has been served is aggrieved by the stop notice, that person may appeal against a stop notice to the magistrate court by way of civil summons. So, Mr. President, even though a stop notice has been issued, the individual has the right, Mr. President, to appeal that stop notice. 2, on an appeal made pursuant to subsection 1, the court, A, if satisfied that permission was granted for the development to which the notice relates, or that no such permission was required in respect of the development, or the conditions subject to which permission was granted, have been compiled with, I believe that should be complied with, as the case may be, must quash the stop notice to which the appeal relates, or B, in any other case, must dismiss the appeal. Three, Mr. President, any person aggrieved by a decision of the magistrate court under subsection 2 may appeal against the decision to the Court of Appeal by filing a notice of appeal within 28 days. So, Mr. President, I believe that this section is fair and balanced. If the Department of Physical Planning issue a stop notice, the individual have the right, Mr. President, to appeal that stop notice. Amendment, Mr. President, to section 41 of the principal ordinance. In subsection 1, by inserting the words and accompanied by at least 2 police officers after the word contractors. Now, Mr. President, I want to pause here because, and I'm going to be very blunt, Mr. President. It appears as though, Mr. President, that some people feel that they can threaten the officers of the Physical Planning Department and say all manner of evil and verbal threat to their person. And we are saying, Mr. President, that these officers are simply doing their job. They are simply doing their job. And we want to let it be known loud and clear that when the physical planning officers enter onto any construction site, they have that right in the first instance. It is the mandate under which, Mr. President, any construction on Nevis is taken, that the physical planning officers have that right. But, Mr. President, there have been the concern of threats. And we are saying, Mr. President, that if the planning officers feel that they are being threatened, they have the right, Mr. President, to request the assistance of the police. In subsection 2, by deleting the words not exceeding $5,000 or imprisonment for a period immediately following the word fine, Mr. President. In subsection 4, by inserting the word in after the word if where it appears, where it first appears. In subsection 4, by deleting the word if where it appears for the second time. Mr. President, amendment to section 44 of the principal ordinance. Section 44 of the principal ordinance is amended in subsection 2 by inserting the word to following the word rise. Section 46 is amended, Mr. President, in subsection 1 by inserting after the word CAP, C-A-P, the phrase 4.02, bracket N, Mr. President. In subsection 2, by deleting the word island, appearing before the word acquisition, and substituting the word land, Mr. President. Amendment to section 47. 47 is amended, Mr. President, in subsection 1 by deleting the word particulars of and substituting a colon. Mr. President, just minor grammatical correction once again. In subsection 1A, by deleting the words an application for permission to develop land, including and substituting the words the following particulars of an application for permission to develop land of a class listed in the 4th schedule. C, in subsection 1A3, by inserting before the words the proposed development, the words a brief description of, Mr. President. By deleting subsection 1D, by deleting subsection 2, Mr. President. In subsection 3, by deleting the words or index map. And G, in subsection 4, by deleting the word 7 and substituting the words 14, Mr. President. Amendments, Mr. President, to subsection 49. Subsection 49 of the principal ordinance is amended in subsection 1 by deleting the phrase License on Business and Occupation Act, CAP 181820, and substituting the phrase License on Business and Occupation Act, CAP 18.20. It's a different piece of legislation, Mr. President, and we just wanted to make sure that we correct that. Amendment, Mr. President, to subsection 53. Section 53 of the principal ordinance is amended in subsection 2 by deleting the words Alien Landholding Regulation Act and substituting the phrase Alien Landholding Regulation Act, CAP 10.01, Mr. President. That too also is a minor correction as it relates to the particular legislation, Mr. President. Amendment to subsection 56. And section 56, Mr. President, of the parent ordinance is amended in subsection 1 by inserting after the word cap the following 6.04N, Mr. President. Amendment of second schedule. The second schedule to the principal ordinance is amended by inserting, following the words coastal zone development, the following words: and in this context, the definition of beach at section 2 shall apply. B, by inserting after the last listed item the following: or any other development that the Director of Physical Planning deem fit, Mr. President. Mr. President, those are the proposed amendments. May it please the Mr. President.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Is it on?
Yes, go ahead.
I rise to make a very small contribution. In fact, it was my intention not to make a contribution at all. I must say that the planning unit is a very significant arm of any developing country. And if it does not function, you can only have confusion. And we have seen many states, island states, small territories developing with or without a planning unit. We have seen confusion with or without a planning unit. My advice to the government is that if the government is serious, it is easy to have a planning unit that works and works efficiently. And if any government is not serious, planning unit or no planning unit, you're going to have problems. I remember the original Planning Unit Act, which was done in 2005. And I remember very well that their power was given to the Director of Planning. If you have a Director of Planning, that director must be properly trained and must really be in charge. The question is, therefore, is a government willing to respect an act that is passed by the government? Is the government willing to respect an act that is passed by the government? And why would any government pass an act and then seek to bypass the Director of Planning, or influence or control or own the Director of Planning? The minister who presented the bill said that the responsibility and the authority should rest with the Director of Planning. I'm not disinclined to disagree with him. But in truth and in fact, and in all practicability, is that what really happens? Is that what really happens? Or is it that you have a Director of Planning who sometimes is not really trained in planning, and secondly, the Director of Planning acquiesces to whatever wishes that the government has? So we end up just where we started. We end up in an original point, and the question is, who's fooling whom? There are many instances available to us that all of us in here can refer to, where government has done things, and I'm not pointing to this government, I'm speaking government in general terms, where government has done things ignoring the director of planning or ignoring the whole of the planning unit. We have had businesses, investors, who have spoken to government ministers and have gone ahead and done things ignoring planning. I think we have had cases here on the island of Nevis where the director of planning has said he does not know, he did not give permission for A to happen or B to happen. And while I'm not pointing any finger at anybody this morning, as I said, I didn't really intend to speak, I'm saying, are we really serious? Does the minister aware of the political implications of what he's saying? And is he sure that he would not be put under pressure to put pressure in turn on the director of planning in some form or the other to do something that the director may not want to do? We know that we have major investors. We had the case of Mrs. I don't remember her name now, but she's at Tower Hill, Ann Bass, Mrs. Bass, versus either the government or some Chinese people. And to me, what I heard was fairly simple. It was a matter of dealing with waste and disposing of certain chemicals, etc., and a number of other things. Who did that? Was the director of planning who gave permission? Was it that the director of planning was fast asleep? Did the government take control of the planning unit and make the decisions, ignoring the director of planning? And if Mr. President, the director of planning had the powers that we are proposing to give to the director of planning, would it have made a difference?
Member for constituency number 4, is that matter in court?
Well, it's in court or not, I'm not going into any details.
No. I asked that question because...
I don't know if it's in court, so what I do know, there was a ruling by the court, and I think, there was an appeal. But I am not even referring to specifics. I am talking about matters. You wish me to
give me a chance. If that matter is in court, and to the best of my knowledge, it is, I would ask you to refrain from going any further with that matter. You spoke about the person and whoever is involved. Let us leave it there, please. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure I'm going to abide.
Mr. President, I am...
Mr. President, sir. I'm sure I'm going to abide by your ruling.
Thank you.
All I will say is there are matters that have happened on the island of Nevis that would cause one to query whether it makes a difference as to whether it makes a difference in regard to who's in charge, the minister, the director of planning, or whom. In some cases, we have had a case where you had a director of planning and somebody else who was not the director of planning making decisions. Is that in court? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I don't want us to make a mockery of ourselves and a mockery of our country. And I don't want us to come in here and pretend that we are putting in place something that is sophisticated and can really help to develop the country when we know the practical situation in terms of politics in the country and ministerial powers and abuse of power, etc. That's what I'm talking about, Mr. President. I don't know if the matter to do with the paradise is in court. And if it is so, please tell me so I can shut up. That is in court too? Okay. So all these matters are in court. The question I must then ask of you, Mr. President, and of the people of Nevis, would this law, would this amendment, would this bill, would this act cause these matters not to be in court? Or is it shifting the onus from the cabinet to the director of planning? And then I pose to you, Mr. President, the question: who appoints the director of planning? As I sat there and listened, and I know sometimes people think I'm not listening, but I am quite capable of doing something else than listening. I sat there and I reflected, Mr. President, on the United States of America. And maybe I often reflect on the United States of America because everything they do, we all try to do it too in the Caribbean. And usually it's rather than bad than the good. And when I think of the United States of America, remember the days when we think of law and order, and we think of jurisprudence and justice in the court. We would think of England, the United Kingdom, or we might even think of the United States of America. And I'm listening to CNN, and I'm listening to MSNBC, and I'm listening to others. And what is the discussion? Who should be on the Supreme Court in the United States of America? Should it be A, because A is a Republican, or should it be B, because B is a Democrat? And who would the president place? Most likely A, because they want certain things to pass. And I tell myself, you know, we are in a sad state. We're in a very sad state when the leading nation in the world appoints a Supreme Court based on politics rather than on the rule of law. And what example is being set to the democratic world, or to the world that pretends to be democratic? Where are we going? What do we hope to achieve? And so I bring that to bear this morning, Mr. President, on what happened earlier. And you made your ruling, so I won't go into it, because I suppose that will be out of order. You made your ruling, but I know what I know. And I don't have to believe I know what I know, and I know when abuse is being taken. Ruling or no ruling, I know. But I'm not here to vex my soul or to get my blood pressure up. I'm not going to do that. I don't have time for that now. But I come back to the point, because I'm not losing the point. The point is the director of planning. Who appoints the director of planning? Just like who appoints the Supreme Court? And when the axe falls on the director of planning, who takes the blame? The director of planning? Or the minister? Or the cabinet? Is the director of planning allowed? And again, we have the case where Mr. Trump says Mr. Macron, or whatever his name, can't speak. Will the director of planning be silenced if the director of planning wishes to go to court and state that they were influenced, they were working under duress? Very, very important points. Would the director of planning have the guts to stand up to the parliamentarians? And would he or she be dismissed? Or, Mr. President, will be some protection be put in place to allow the director of planning to do his or her job? Where do we stand on the Integrity Act? Is it is it working? Is it in operation? Is it something that we can use to try to safeguard, to make sure things happen correctly, or to protect someone like the director of planning? And I may pause here and say I can compliment the court, if only for once, for their ruling in terms of the protection of civil servants and their jobs, to ensure that they can make statements, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and have political views without being bullied and being fired, etc., etc. I'm very happy for that. But I'm saying that it's very important, if we are going down that route, that the checks and balances are in place to protect lieutenant unit. And since I can't refer to the cases because they're sub judice, I have to leave them alone, but they're rattling around in my head. They're rattling around in my head, and I'm thinking about them. And I'm thinking about how they came into being. I'm thinking. That's one thing you can't stop. Now anybody can stop me from thinking. And so, Mr. President, I put those out. And I say this. Whether the law is amended or not amended is really not the significant thing. I listened to the amendments, and the presenter did his best to outline all the amendments. I suppose we inside understood. Those who are in the public domain, they wouldn't understand anything. In fact, they wouldn't be listening after a time because it's not making any sense to them. But the point is this. You make these amendments and you say you're improving the law. But what is happening to the attitude of those who are involved in dispensing the law? What is happening in terms of the reality of the situation on the ground? What is happening in terms of powerful investors who are able to come and push you in a corner, or even able to start without your permission, and the representative presented that, and you can't do much about it? What about the man who meets the individual minister and seeks to exercise influence in one way or the other? And these are concerns that I have. And these are concerns that the public should have, Mr. President. I will make the statement that in some of the earlier presentations, I know that I'm not, and I know, so I won't do it. I know that I cannot at this stage respond to any of them because you're going to say that matter is not before you. That was the understatement of ministers. I know exactly what you would do. I know exactly why certain things are put on the statements of ministers, so I leave them alone. All I'll say, they're rattling around in my head as well. And I wish we would conduct ourselves in the House so things like those don't have to rattle around in people's head. With those few words, I thank you very much, sir, and I take my seat.
Mr. President, good morning. Good morning to all. I rise to lend my support for the bill before this Honourable House this morning, the bill short titled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Ordinance 2018. Before I get into that, Mr. President, let me just say that it's always a blessing to be given the opportunity to serve, and it's not one that I take lightly. So I'd like to register my appreciation to my colleagues who I serve with, to the member opposite, and of course to you and to the general public. So, President, the bill before this Honourable House this morning is an important one. The amendments that the mover of the bill so ably took his time to go through. They're very important for the development of the island of Nevis. The physical planning ordinance is what governs physical development here on the island of Nevis. And no island, including this one, can develop and continue to move forward into the future if we can't build. And so these amendments serve to bring us here in Nevis in line with advancing technologies and so on. You would have heard that now things are to be put on the website as opposed to just using the Gazette as was done in the past. I'm sure if there are any young persons watching us via NTV or listening via the radio, I believe we're live, I'm sure most of them would not know what the Gazette is, but they would know how to get on the internet. They would be able to get on the internet via their cell phones. They would have the cell phones with them every day. And so they would have access to whatever is published from a government's perspective, including things to do with development. So we are modernizing the law. Let me say congratulations to the mover of the bill and the minister with responsibility for planning, and congratulate him and his team. I see the permanent secretary, Mr. Stapleton, is there. Dr. Stapleton, sorry. I should always remember that. And I also see P.S. Wakely Daniel is here, and he would have served previously as assistant secretary in that same ministry and would have also been instrumental in some of the earlier forms of this ordinance, some of the early legwork that was done to get this ordinance to where it is today. I also want to register thanks and appreciation to those persons who would have been working in the ministry, those who worked in the past, those who are there now, and also those at the Department of Physical Planning. A big thanks also to the legal department, to the lawyers in the legal department and the persons who would have drafted the ordinance. Sometimes, you know, Mr. President, we tend to take our lawyers for granted, but lawyers are special people and we need them. When you read the ordinance, it takes a meticulous individual to be able to go through and tell you to change this word and replace it with that word, and, you know, to keep track of all of that. I actually did a reading of the new bill, and it's something that is right in my wheelhouse, something that was interesting to me, and even sometimes having to go back and forth between this ordinance and the parent ordinance to see exactly what you're looking at. It can be cumbersome at times. So we really have to appreciate the work that the legal department has done to pull this amendment bill together so that we can have a good ordinance to go forward with. So congratulations all around to the mover of the bill and minister, to all those in the ministry, to those in the Department of Physical Planning, those in the legal department, and those in the general public who would have made their contribution toward getting us here today. I think the mover of the bill, when he spoke, said, he gave a brief history of what was going on with this bill. He said that in 2016, we got a grant from CARFA, and resulting from that grant, we were able to bring in a consultant, Ms. Tira Green, somebody who has worked all around the region on similar legislation like this. I think at the time when we were looking at the legislation, and I happened to be the minister charged at the time when that happened, we wanted somebody who had the necessary experience. So when we placed when we placed it up for bidding, and we got that particular individual, we were happy when she won the bid, and the work that resulted from it, we are now seeing the fruits of that coming to be here. What I propose to do, Mr. President, is to go through a few of what I would refer to as the highlights, a few of the bigger things that are coming out of the bill. I don't propose to go through the entire bill, just to highlight a few things and show how they will serve to improve the work that goes on at physical planning and improve the ability of the Nevis Island administration to move infrastructure work forward here on the island of Nevis. I'll start in section 2 with the interpretation. And of course, with any bill, the interpretation would give you certain keywords that the bill feels that they are necessary to point out and to describe. And we start with that they have added in a definition for the word beach. And they have basically said that the beach means that area of the coastal zone from the seaward limit of the foreshore running inland to the vegetation line or other natural barriers represented by a marked change in material or natural physiographic form, whichever is closer to the landward limit of the foreshore. And it goes on. You would think that beach is something that everybody knows. You would think it's a simple thing, but it is not. Understand, Mr. President? So I think that it was important to put that definition there, because I know from experience that there can be much ambiguity, there can be much confusion about what the beach is. So the mover of the bill and the department has seen it necessary to put that definition into the bill so that there can be no vagueness in the future, so that there can be no ambiguity. I myself, Mr. President, have seen what a little vagueness and ambiguity can do. When somebody wants to cause mischief, not having this little definition can become a big, big issue. So that simple thing is something very important to the bill. They've put the official website so there can be no ambiguity in speaking about the website going forward. So there's a definition for that. We move on to section 5, the amendment to section 5. No, section 5 under the amendment bill speaks of the amendment to section number 6 in the parent bill, which speaks to the Development Advisory Committee. And what it seeks to do is to, first of all, in in subsection 6(2), by inserting after paragraph E a new paragraph F as follows: an environmental health officer. So it seeks to add an environmental health officer to the Development Advisory Committee. That's right? Okay, yeah, okay. So I'm correct. And Mr. President, that is very important. Very important. The officers of environmental health have a big role to play in development. So, President, I don't know if you're aware, but at least 90% of our water in Nevis comes from underground wells. So at this point in time, and the minister can correct me if I'm wrong, we have some very pristine wells. Our aquifer is good. We don't have to go through any lengthy treatment processes for our water, because the quality of water that we get from our underground sources is tops. Okay? And the duty of the environmental health officers is to protect the environment so that all of the people of Nevis are protected, giving those officers a seat on the committee that is going to be making the decisions about what developments are passed and the forms that the developments take. It's very, very important. So that amendment to that subsection, adding the environmental health officer to be a voting member of the Development Advisory Committee, is a very important one. Environmental health, these are the people who are responsible for looking out to see if our septic tanks and so on are good. You know, when construction is going on, in Nevis we don't have any big central sewage system. So we use the septic and the soak-away system. And the difference between a good septic tank and a bad septic tank. Mr. President, you could build a septic tank A and build a septic tank B. And from the outside, they look similar. But what they're able to do is completely different based on how they were built. And that's why the environmental officers, that's why they are so important, because they are the ones who know the difference between what is good and what is bad. And they are the ones responsible for ensuring that during construction, that the proper systems are put in place. They are the ones responsible at the Development Advisory Committee stage for ensuring that the type of system that is being put in place is a proper system, is a system that is sized properly based on the development, is a system that can accommodate the amount of waste, the type of waste, and all of these different things. They are the experts, and they should be on the committee. And so this amendment to put them on the committee is an important one. We go down to Amendment 6, bracket 10A. And it says that that section shall not apply to any member of the Development Advisory Committee. Let me make sure I have it. Yeah. And what that section speaks about, a voting member of the committee must, at the commencement of a meeting, inform the chairperson of any matter before the meeting in which he or she has either directly or indirectly, personally or by his or her spouse, domestic partner, or other near relative, an interest in the project. Disclosure, Mr. President, is important. You don't want to have Tom making a decision on a development where Tom has an interest in the development and is directly affected by the development. So in a case like that, Tom can simply recuse himself from making that decision. Subsection 10. Yes. So what this section does, Mr. President, is to avoid conflict of interest, basically. Section good governance. In section 10 in the amendment bill, it speaks to section 17 under the parent bill. And basically what section 17 under the parent bill does is that it speaks to the application itself to develop land. And what the bill says is that the principal ordinance is amended by repealing section 17 and replacing it as follows. And Madam Legal Advisor, am I at liberty to say what we are going to do in terms of the amendments? Okay. Yeah. So, President, if you would permit me, because we plan to make a few small adjustments to this section during the committee stage. So if you would allow me to explain a bit. What section, let me first say what section 17 hopes to do. Initially, section 17 gave us what we are supposed to submit if we want to develop land here on the island of Nevis. And basically, development of land means to build anything. So if you want to build a home, a shop, a business place, whatever it is that you want to build, from something that small to if you're going to build, let's say, a hotel, all of it falls under development of land. So section 10 under the amendment ordinance amends section 17. The principal ordinance is amended by repealing section 17 and replacing with the following. 17(1). A person intending to develop land must make the following applications to the Director of Physical Planning. Application for concept consideration and acceptance, and application for permission to develop land. And Mr. President, this is going to apply for the larger developments. If you go to the parent ordinance, in the back of the parent ordinance where you have the schedules, and you head to the second schedule, it outlines the type of developments that we deem as the larger developments. And this type of application, Mr. President, where an application for concept, consideration, and acceptance, and followed by an application for permission to develop land, this is going to apply to developments of the type found in the second schedule and the 4th schedule of the parent ordinance. For those types found in the 3rd schedule, and those would be applications for construction, alteration, extension, renovation, or demolition of timber frame buildings, basically your small house, Mr. President. The application for those would be a direct application for permission to develop land. So they will not need to go through the A step, where there is an application for concept consideration and acceptance. So if you're building your small home, your small business place, once it doesn't fall into schedule, the 2nd schedule or the 4th schedule, then you go directly to an application. If you're going to be doing a large development, a large subdivision, a large business, then you start with an application for concept consideration or acceptance. In the past, we used to refer to this as an application for, how did it go? We used to refer to this as an application for approval in principle, Mr. President. But what we found in the past is that once some developers have come, applied for this approval in principle, and gotten the permission for approval in principle, that there was some confusion where sometimes a developer thought that, okay, well, this was the permission to build. So the amendment now clarifies this. The amendment goes on to state specifically under Section 3 of that newly amended section that an application for permission to develop land shall not be made unless the director has considered and accepted the concept of the development to which the application relates. So there can be no ambiguity about this any longer. It clearly states that you need to get that concept approval first before you can proceed to getting the actual development approval. You need to get that concept approval first before you can submit to get the actual approval. So, President, this would serve to remove those ambiguities, and it will also serve to streamline the process so that when developers come, they know exactly what the process is. So they don't come and say, well, approval in principle, and then say, well, I have approval. No. Approval of the concept. Once planning say, okay, your concept is okay, it can work here, then you're free to go forward now to seek full approval for your development. And that, Mr. President, I think is a big, big part of this amendment ordinance. I think this will be a big help to the government. I think it will be a big help to planning. I think it's going to be a big help to developers, a big help to the practitioners in the field, the architects and the draftsmen and so on, that they no longer have that ambiguity about exactly what approval is. They will not now mistake an approval in principle for a final approval. And Mr. President, it might sound like something simple, but this thing has caused a lot of problems in the past. Seriously, I would know. This thing has caused a lot of sleepless nights for people. It has caused a lot of stress for people. And so this new section in the amendment bill will relieve us of all of that stress and all of those issues, and it will leave us with a streamlined legislation, with a streamlined process going forward, Mr. President. Mr. President, in that same section, under Part 2, the amended ordinance clearly now shows exactly what items the developer or the person submitting the development would need to submit to the Department of Physical Planning in order to get approval. It also speaks about what you need to bring in terms of the land. It says that you need to have evidence of ownership of the land, or in the absence thereof, a registered memorandum of transfer, registered deed, registered lease, or a notarized letter signed by the owner or agent of the owner of the land to which the application relates, acknowledging that the owner has knowledge of and does not object to the making of the application. Mr. President, that's another important thing. It might sound simple, but it's not so simple, you know? This ensures, Mr. President, that people have the right to develop on the land that they're seeking to develop on. Planning cannot process an application if the person making the application doesn't have the rights to the land. And we've seen time and time again over the years certain instances where there's conflict over land. We've seen instances where persons have sought to make applications where they didn't have the necessary permission, the necessary rights to the land. The amendment now states clearly what you need to have in your possession in order to successfully make an application. So if someone now seeks to come to make an application where they do not have the grounds to do so, the law is clear. The law doesn't leave it in the hand of the Director of Physical Planning or the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry or the Minister for the person to come to approach and say, well, you know, I really want to build the house, or I really need to build the house. The law states clearly the conditions. The law states clearly what you need to have to qualify to develop that particular piece of land. So, Mr. President, the legislation continues to seek to streamline the process, to make it easier. So if I know that the land is not mine, then I'm not going to bother to come. You know, because there's no way around it. If I know, Mr. President, that the land belongs to you, and I want to develop the land, then I need to come to you to get that notarized letter. I need the Director of Physical Planning will need to see that letter from you, stamped by a notary public, to say that you have consciously given me the approval and the okay to use the land. Mr. President, Section 18. Well, Section 11 under the amendment ordinance speaks to Section 18. And basically what it does is it is replacing everything that says approval in principle and using the words concept, consideration, and acceptance. And what we are trying to do is to take out that word approval. Because once people see the word approval, they don't read any further than approval. It doesn't go on to say approval in principle, it stops at approval. So approval is approval. So we have now, Mr. President, removed that. And I do not believe that concept, consideration, and acceptance can be confused for approval. So I believe that that is a good thing. So that whole section of the primary ordinance, wherever it says approval in principle or approval as it is normally read, is now replaced with concept, consideration, and acceptance. And I believe that that is a wonderful thing, Mr. President. Section, let's skip forward, because I did say I'm not going to go through everything. We're skipping that one. Yes, Mr. President. Let me go a bit further. Yes. Section 22 of the amendment bill, which speaks to Section 40 of the primary legislation. Section 40 of the principal ordinance is amended by deleting subsections 1 and 2 and by substituting the following. If, in the opinion of the Director of Physical Planning, it is expedient to prevent the carrying out of a development in relation to which planning permission has not been granted, he may serve a stop notice in respect of that land prohibiting any person on whom it is served, brackets, whether by themselves or through their agents or servants, close brackets, from carrying on or continuing any specified operations on the land. 2, if a stop notice is to be served in respect of any land in relation to which an enforcement notice has already been served with regard to any specific operations on the land, A, alleged to be carried out without permission, B, in breach of conditions subject to which permission was granted, or C, so closely associated with those operations as to constitute substantially the same operations, then the stop notice must not be served before the expiry of the period allowed for the compliance with the enforcement notice, and must contain a reference to and have annexed to it a copy of the enforcement notice previously served. Mr. President, what this part of the amendment is seeking to do is to clarify some ambiguities. And you'll hear me use the word, or you have heard me use the word, ambiguity a lot. Because you see, when you're dealing with issues such as these, the law has to be clear, the law has to be concise. The law has to tell the Director of Planning and the other agents of planning, this is what you can do. This is what you cannot do. This is what you should do in a specific situation. Too often, in the past, Mr. President, you've had situations where planning should take action, where planning probably needs to take action, but the ordinance did not provide a clear path for that action to be taken. So, Mr. President, what we have here in the amendment is that the ordinance will now provide clear instructions to the department. The ordinance is now saying when you can serve the stop notice. The ordinance in section 2 is saying that if you've served an enforcement notice, and basically what the enforcement notice does, Mr. President, is if somebody is carrying out development and the inspector or some agent of planning goes on the site and they realize that the work that is being carried out is not in accordance with the plan, then they can give the developer or the contractor a specified period of time to comply, to come into compliance, whether it is 14 days or 28 days or whatever the law prescribes. It now says that if the time expires and they have not complied, that the stop notice should be served. And it specifies how you can serve the stop notice, who you can serve it on. In the past, you weren't sure who you could give the stop notice to. That was not specified. It is now specified. In the case where no planning approval is given at all, where you won't need an enforcement notice, because there's no breach in the sense of an approval for a specific type of work to be done and the person differing from that. In this case, you have no approval. So if you go and you see development being done where there's no approval, then an immediate stop comes into play. And the amended legislation now gives you that authority to give that immediate stop. Mr. President, the law has to be just. So the law provides for the right to appeal against a stop notice. So if a developer is served with a stop notice and he then feels that it is unfair and he is aggrieved by the stop notice, then he has that right to appeal against the stop notice. And the law now states specifically how that appeal is to be done. I think it says that let me read it. If any person on whom a stop notice has been served is aggrieved by the stop notice, that person may appeal against the stop notice to the magistrate's court by way of civil summons. So it says that you can go to the magistrate's court. And the court is there for everybody, Mr. President. So the law now gives you that avenue for your appeal. The government is not just saying, look, we're going to stop and there's nothing that you can do about it. If you feel aggrieved, then you can take it to the magistrate's court and a determination will be made on whether the stop notice is just, if indeed the individual or the developer has been aggrieved. So, Mr. President, you see the basic trend of the amendments to streamline the existing law, to modernize the existing law, to ensure, Mr. President, that the planning department has clear and concise guidelines as to how they should conduct themselves. Mr. President, it shows that the persons who framed the amendments were looking at fairness. That planning has that authority that when the laws are breached, when the government, in a sense, or the people are aggrieved, that action can be taken by way of the enforcement notice and the stop notice. And it now states clearly how they are to be done. But if the developer is aggrieved, it provides them with an avenue. So it is a marked improvement on what was there before, Mr. President. Mr. President, along with the ordinance, there's also some regulations, and I don't propose to go through the regulations because that would take all day, and I know we're heading towards lunchtime, but we have the regulations. We also have the laws for advertising, and that again is something important. We are a small island. We only have so much space. And the Department of Physical Planning is also responsible for controlling the way we advertise. You know, Mr. President, when you drive on the main road, you see a lot of billboards and so on. You can't just put up billboards where you want to. There's a process. There's an application process that you have to go through. And you know, you can't just put up what you want, when you want, how you want. You got to go through the process. And the regulations now would stipulate and would state clearly how that process is to be carried out. So, Mr. President, I don't want to continue any further. What I will say in closing is that this amendment law that we are here to debate and pass is something that a lot of people have worked hard to see come to the House, and I want to congratulate them. I want to really congratulate the Minister, because he has been Minister with responsibility for planning for only a short time. And to be able to bring a significant bill like this to the House in such a short term, in such a short time, it deserves much commendation. I know how hard this bill is to come by. So that's why I said that he should come in for the highest praise and also highest commendations to the ministry and to the legal department who worked so hard on this bill. Mr. President, I wish the bill safe passage through this honorable House. May it please you.
Mr. President, I rise in support of the Nevis Physical Plan and Development Control Amendment Bill 2019. I believe that both the presenter, the Honourable Minister, and the Junior Minister who has come and who has, of course, intimate knowledge of all matters planning, being an engineer by training, I think that they have laid out in a very cogent way all the necessary considerations. I, however, Mr. President, wanted to rise because I wanted to lend my own support and commendation to the legal department for the excellent work that they would have done and continue to do. This bill is technical, highly technical. It has led to the most litigation that this government has seen. It seems that it is something that is always fraught with, I think the language that the junior minister used was ambiguity. And lawyers tend to try to explore whatever ambiguities they can find. I'm so happy I'm now a politician. So, Mr. President, the reality is that the planning legislation generally in the country is critical, because it is through that framework that we get development. And we have all seen what is happening on the island of Nevis. We understand that the naysayers will say what they have to say, but the reality is that all across the length and breadth of Nevis, we have construction that is happening. I took a little drive just in my own constituency quite recently in the area of Prospect. And in the space of 2 or 3 minutes of driving, I saw, I think it was 5 homes under construction. And I think that is true throughout the length and breadth of Nevis, where a lot of private home construction is happening. We also, of course, have the construction that is being done by government through the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation. We have developments of various sizes happening on the island of Nevis. We have now the massive reconstruction that will start on June 1st by DCK at the Four Seasons Resort. We have road construction. We have all kinds of construction that is happening here. I can go on to outline where construction is happening and what is going on. We see construction right here at Pinnis, I believe by, I'm not sure the company name, but some company that Mr. Dion Daniel is involved in. And so there's a lot of construction happening on the island. And I think that people sometimes do not recognize that planning is critical for that construction to occur. That without planning, and without planning doing its job, that economic boost that we get from construction will not materialize for the island of Nevis. And so what do we expect of planning? And I see the director of planning is here. We expect planning, of course, to be professional, to be fair, but most of all, we expect planning to conduct itself within the 4 corners of the legislation. It is whenever we stray outside those 4 corners that we open ourselves, Mr. President, to legal challenge and legal attack. Mark you, sometimes we don't stray, and we still get legal challenge and legal attack. And that is why some cases, which I will not mention, are currently before the court. And we'll have to have the court will have to do what it has to do. But I echo the sentiment expressed by the junior minister that what we're seeing here is really an attempt to modernize, an attempt to make fairer by giving the developer every opportunity to object, to appeal, as the case may be. But whilst I do that, Mr. President, I also want to echo the sentiments of the move of the bill and to say to the general public that the men and women who work at the planning department are doing their job. If they don't do their job properly, you have buildings here that will collapse because they're not built to spec. You have all kinds of problems with health, electrical, and other problems that might arise. And I think the public needs to appreciate that it is by doing their job properly that we get the kind of resilient buildings that we have been talking about and that we need, particularly as we live in a zone that is susceptible to hurricanes and earthquakes and the like. So when the planning team comes to look at a development, I would urge the general public to cooperate rather than what we're hearing of threats and attacks on the planning members of the planning team. And so I support fully that the public should be asked to be a part of the process and a cooperative hand, if you will, working with planning to ensure that what we seek to do in terms of the development of Nevis is done and done properly. I wanted also to rise, Mr. President, to commend the Director of Planning and his team, because I know it is a difficult job. And I heard some comments being made by the honourable member opposite, saying that the planning department and the director are normally thrown under the bus or something to that effect. And we appreciate that mistakes have been made in the past. And I'm happy that he said that he's not talking about any particular government. We appreciate that. What we are seeking to do is to ensure, Mr. President, that those mistakes are a thing of the past. And that what we are now seeking to do is to create a much better framework, create a much better paradigm within which planning will do its work. And I want from this rostrum to say that we support the work of the Director of Planning, that he and his office, that they have the fullest support and confidence of this government, and that we will continue to work because planning is so critical. And to give a sense to the public of how critical planning is, in 2016, I have some numbers here, planning would have received 202 plans and approved 187. In 2017, they received 253 plans and approved 233. And in 2018, they received 280 plans and approved 255. And as at April this year, that's when I had the last numbers, Mr. President, planning had received 93 plans and approved 64. We advise that currently there are over 150 active construction sites on the island of Nevis. And some, like the construction that is going on at Tower Hill, and that which is soon to start at Four Seasons, are massive construction projects. So planning and the role of planning is going to be absolutely critical. And that is why we have come today after much deliberation. I think this bill had its first reading some months ago, October. So since last year. And what have we done? We have consulted, we have looked at it, and I believe up to this morning, we were still talking about getting the right provisions to make it fit for purpose, Mr. President, and to ensure that we give the Director of Planning and his team the necessary tools to do the job. If they do their job properly, all of Nevis benefits. If they do their job properly, contractors benefit, TDC Hosfords and sellers of hardware and sellers of lumber and building materials benefit, all the concrete companies in Nevis benefit, those who sell cement. I'm even hearing down to the food vendors, because they go on the sites and carry food to the various construction sites. The truth is, the entire island benefits. And as Minister of Finance, the Treasury gets a little benefit too. So we are here to support and to continue to support the work, and that is why we have come. And I stand because I'm exceedingly proud of the Honourable Minister and mover of the bill. New minister, but he operating like an old minister. Old meaning that he has been here for a long time, not otherwise. Old in the sense that he's been a minister for a long time. And his team, Dr. Stapleton, the Assistant PS, Denzel Stan, the entire team, because they have worked hard to get us to where we are today. And I want to commend them and to encourage them and to let them know that their work is appreciated and it does not go unnoticed. And I believe the people of Nevis, for every man and woman out there, for every family that is thinking about building a little home, constructing a space for a little business, I want them to recognize that planning and the planning department are critical to what it is they're seeking to achieve. I want to commend especially the provision for health inspector and environmental health officer within the process, because in the past I've heard that sometimes we're a little slow down because, of course, the ministries and the departments are separate. I think now we're talking about having someone embedded in planning on the DAC in order to assist with this process. I think that that is a good development, Mr. President. We just saw the recent World Bank report on doing business, and we did not fare very well in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so I feel that these are the types of provisions which will help us to get to where we need to go in terms of ease of doing business. And we must continue to work together, encourage each other as we continue hand in hand to build this island of Nevis. So I want to wish this bill safe passage and to see in the committee stages what other amendments might come. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I rise to wrap up and wish this bill safe passage through this honourable House. Mr. President, I'm a little disappointed that the honourable member for number 5 left, because he would have put a few things on the table which I felt was... Mr. President, he indicated that is the government willing to respect an act that it passed? And Mr. President, I feel that there lies the problem. I think that from time to time we come here in this parliament and we table legislation and we pass legislation. And it is almost as though that we come to parliament and then the government itself seems as though it has the autonomy to break the same legislation that it passes. And there lies the problem. And I'm saying, Mr. President, that while I think I understand where he was coming from, I believe we need to rise to a different level. We really need, Mr. President, to understand that the laws are the laws of the land, even untoward the government. And I believe, Mr. President, that we on this side at all times would seek to ensure that we abide by the laws that we ourselves pass in this honorable House. Mr. President, he would have also indicated that, or asked the question, I don't know if it was a question or a rhetorical statement, is it that we are shifting the onus from the cabinet to the Director of Planning? And Mr. President, it draws me to Section 21 of the parent legislation, subsection 3, which gives me, Mr. President, the indication that the Director of Planning do have some cover. And with your permission, Mr. President, I want to read that section. Section 21 of the parent legislation, subsection 3. The Director of Physical Planning must not determine any application other than an application for a class or development mentioned in the third schedule, unless the application has first been referred to the committee, that is the Development Advisory Committee, for review, and the committee has considered the application and advised the Director of Physical Planning accordingly, and he follows that advice. So, Mr. President, the Director of Physical Planning, based on the class of certain application, is not necessarily making a decision in isolation or on his own. And so the notion or the idea that one may be seeking to throw the director under the bus or shifting the onus onto the Director of Planning, I personally do not share that view, Mr. President. I believe, Mr. President, that what we are seeking to do is to give the Director of Planning and the Planning Department the necessary legislation, Mr. President, for them to function and to function properly and effectively, Mr. President. Mr. President, in closing, I want to end by thanking my predecessor with responsibility for planning, now given the responsibility for education. This process, Mr. President, started under his watch, and I want to thank him for being the catalyst at first under which this initiative took place. I believe some of the groundwork would have started, and we would have just ensured that we continue to bring this legislation to this juncture. I want to thank, Mr. President, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry and the Assistant, Dr. Stapleton and Mr. Stanley, for their hard work and involvement in this process. I also want to thank the Director for his involvement as well. I know we have knocked our heads together on numerous occasions on this particular legislation. And, Mr. President, the Legal Department. I think that they have gone beyond the call of duty on this particular legislation. I see emails coming to my email late at night and early in the morning. So I know, Mr. President, that they would have really put in a significant amount of time in this particular piece of legislation. And, Mr. President, I want to say to the general public that this is a piece of legislation that we seek to ensure that development on the island of Nevis can be much more smoother, can be much more effective, that both sides, all sides, can be benefit from it, Mr. President.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment 2019 be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to amend the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, Chapter 6.09, in bracket N, and for matters related thereto are connected therewith.
The bill has been read a second time. Housing Committee. Yes, yes.
Section 30.
No, wait until she gets back to her position. No. Wait until Ms. Luke. Wait until she gets back.
Section 30.
The question is that Section 30 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 29.
The question is that Section 29 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 28.
The question is that the Section 28 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against?
Section 27.
Question is that Section 27 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 26.
The question is that Section 26 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 25.
Question is that Section 25 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 24.
The question is that Section 24 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 23.
The question is that Section 23 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 22.
The question is that Section 22 do form part of the bill.
A few amendments. 40A, Section 2A. Third line down, subject to which permission was granted have been compiled, that should be complied.
Yes? That's all?
By inserting under section, and then in section 42, you have A, B, C, and then you come down to B. By inserting a new section 40A, that should be B.
Senator Lee.
A should change it. A should change it.
Change to B.
Yeah. You got A up here.
Should be B. Get that?
No, I didn't get it.
40A. Above 40A.
Yes.
40A.
Yes, I have 40A.
Change that bracket above it to B. Instead of A, there's a small A in bracket that
Yeah.
should be B. Operation, full stop, full stop is that should be.
And remove the got that?
And then
Remove the full stop after operations. And C, C,
yeah.
C.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Section 22.
Question is that Section 22 do form part of the bill with the amendments 2BC and 2 section where we correct 40A to 40B, as well as in subsection 2A, compiled, it be replaced by complied. That's correct. With the amendments now do form, the question is that the subsection 22 with the amendments outlined do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 21.
Question is that section 21 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 20.
Question is that section 20 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 19.
Question is that section 19 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 18.
Question is that section 18 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against, the ayes have it.
Section 17.
The question is that Section 17 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against, the ayes have it.
Section 16.
Question is that Section 16 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against, the ayes have it.
Section 15.
Deleting that entire section.
Okay. Question is that Section 15 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? As deleted. Well, I asked the question. Deleted. Question is that Section 15 be deleted, do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Is deleted. Is deleted. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 14.
Question is that Section 14 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 13.
Question is that Section 13 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 12.
Question is that Section 12 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 11.
Question is that Section 11 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 10.
Question is that Section 10 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
We have a few amendments, Mr. President.
Yes.
Section 3.
Section 3.
An application for permission to develop land. We are inserting after land listed in third and fourth schedule.
Second and fourth.
Second and fourth. Listed in second and fourth schedule. This third and fourth. No, second and fourth. What are those schedules? Listed in second and fourth schedule, Mr. President.
Question is that Section 10 with the amendment to subsection 3 listed in second and fourth schedule do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
We have some further amendment, Mr. Speaker. The same section, same amendment to section 17.
Section
Same section 10, amendment to section 17. On the application, Mr. President, we want to change number A to 17(1)A, and a person intending to develop land, we want to insert listed in schedule 2 and 4. Must make the following application to the Director of Physical Plans.
I'm not with you there because you said 17.
Section 10.
10.
Heading amendment to section 17. Section 10, the heading is amendment to section 17.
Right.
Okay. The question is that there's amendment to section 17, listed 3 listed in schedule 2 and 4 as amended do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
We're also changing the numbering to Mrs. 17(1)A, changing the numbers.
17(1)A. As is here now, 17A applications come down.
Yes. So we had A originally, that would be 17(1)A, and then we changing the number A and B to I, and Roman numeral I and Roman numeral 2. And then we have 17(1)B, a person intending to develop land of a nature listed in Schedule 3 must make application for permission to develop land. And then we number that section prescribed by the minister to 2. Why do we not change it, Mr. President?
I'm confused here.
This becomes 1.
Let's take it from the top again, Mr. President. After application.
Application, yeah?
Yes. We're changing the numbering from A to 17(1)A.
17(1)A.
Right.
1A.
And then a person intending to develop land, we are inserting listed in Schedule 2 and 4.
Yes.
We're changing the A and B to Roman numeral I and 2.
Yes.
And then adding a 1B, a person intending to develop land of a nature listed in Schedule 3 must make an application for permission to develop land.
That has to be written in.
Yes.
A person intended B, yeah, to develop land
Of a nature listed.
of nature listed yes
In Schedule 3.
in Schedule 3
Must make an application to develop land. Application for permission to develop land.
person to permission to develop land of a nature listed in Schedule 3 must make application for developing land. Am I correct? Do I have it correct? person intended to develop land of nature listed in Schedule 3 must make application for permission. Let me just read this from here. Let me just hold this and read it because I have it differently. Okay, you ready now?
Wait, let me just get another.
Good.
Subsection 17. Section 17 is amended. Listed in 1A. Amendment to 1A in schedule second to the fourth schedule. Second and the fourth schedule. And permission in section the section 1A and 1B and then we have subsection numeral 1. Now become A. Okay. Okay. 17. Question is that section 10. Is amended (1)(a) a person intended to develop land listed in Schedule 2 and 4 must take the following application to the director, and the A becomes 1, 2, B, sorry, becomes 2, Roman numerals 1 and 2, A and B becomes A and A become numeral 1, B numeral 2, and then a person intended to develop land of a nature listed in Schedule 3 must make an application for permission to develop land.
And that now is 17(1)(b), what you just read.
17(1)(b)
Yes.
becomes a person intended to develop land of a nature listed in Schedule 3 must make an application for permission to develop land.
Yeah, that's correct. And we change the second part to 2, and that's it.
And the second part to 2.
From 17(2).
Okay. 17(2). Right.
Good?
Yes. So that becomes part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Hear my order.
Section 9.
Question is that Section 9 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
Section 8.
Question is that Section 8 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Section 7.
The question is that Section 7 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Section 6.
Section 6 do form part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Section
5.
The question is Section 5 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Section
4.
Question is that Section 4 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 3.
Question is that Section 3 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Section 2.
The question is that Section 2 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye.
Section 1.
The question is that Section 1 do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
May I ask Mr. Chair, that the numbering of the bill, that it be renumbered? Remember, we took out Section 15.
Yes.
So that 1 to 14 is accurate.
Accurate, but
16 now
16 becomes
15.
yes, yes.
So we renumber from paragraph 16 becomes 15.
Yes. The question is that question is that sections 1 to 14 remain as is
Numbering.
in the numbering, and the numbers 16 become 15 and subsequent order be changed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. The ayes have it.
Title.
The question is that the title do form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. House resumes its sitting.
Mr. President, I rise to report to this Honorable House that the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Amendment Bill 2019 has passed through committee stage with a few amendments, and I seek your leave to have Rule 57 of the standing orders be suspended so that the bill can be moved a third time and pass.
Shortly entitled the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Ordinance 2019 be read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
A bill to amend the Nevis Physical Planning and Development Control Ordinance, Chapter 6.09 in bracket N, and for matters related thereto are connected therewith.
The bill has been read a third time and pass.
Adjournment.
Mr. President, I rise and seek your leave for the adjournment of this Honorable House. Sign it out.
Mr. President, I rise to second the motion.
The question is that this House be adjourned, sign it aye. Those in favor? Aye. Those against it? House adjourned.